So let's bring into the conversation to talk about this major development. Our friend, former federal prosecutor, legal analyst, Neama Rahmani, he joins me. Neama, good to see you here. Are you surprised that a trial date has already been set? He was just arrested and charged, what, not even a month ago here? This is moving along quite rapidly.
I'm not surprised, Andrew. And the defense has said that they intend to push this case to trial. And I think that's even more likely now that Combs is in custody. We think that the defense is going to base this case likely on cross-examination. The reason I think that is when the new judge in this case, Judge Subramanian, who the first appearance was before today, the case was transferred from Judge Carter for reasons unknown. Now, Subramanian's a newer judge appointed by Biden, has mostly a civil background, not a lot of criminal experience. So it was interesting to see how he was going to handle this case, and he's handling it like any other case. And the big case he's handling right now is the Department of Justice versus Ticketmaster and the antitrust case. But to the extent that Combs doesn't want to waive time and wants to push the case forward, the government's going to have to comply. It's the defendant's right to a speedy trial. And when we're talking about estimates of how long the trial would take, the government said about 3 weeks for their witnesses and their presentation. And the defense said they only need 1 week, which means that
Wow.
I think they're going to base this case on attacking the credibility of the witnesses. Many of them have filed civil lawsuits. So they're going to say this is extortion. It's a money grab. It's a shakedown. It's all about money. And that's where they're fabricating these stories. So I think given the fact that Combs is in custody, the fact that the case will be mostly based on cross-examination, the defense's position is going to be, let's push this case to trial as quickly as possible. The government may not be prepared and we may jam them up.
So, I mean, if the defense only wants a week of their arguments, does that mean they won't call up their client to the stand? Well, did he testify or not? Or should we not get ahead of ourselves here? Is it too early?
Anything's possible. We have seen a trend where defendants have taken the stand and testified more and more. Historically, they haven't. The challenge when you put your defendant on the stand in a criminal case is the entire case is going to come down entirely to his or her testimony. I mean, jurors are going to lean forward and start paying attention. And if that defendant lies, that's a quick recipe for a guilty verdict. And I think the challenge in this case is not necessarily the witnesses, Andrew. It's the video evidence. And there's a treasure trove of it. Prosecutors were talking about it today. Terabytes and terabytes of data seized from 96 different devices during the raids of Diddy's homes in Miami, Los Angeles. And when the search warrants were executed, he was at the airport. They even took 9 devices from him. So if you believe longtime girlfriend Cassie Ventura, and I do, Diddy recorded many of these sex acts. We've obviously all seen the CNN video where he appears to be beating her at the Intercontinental Hotel. So if there is a lot of video evidence, I don't see how Diddy can take the stand and really rebut that evidence. Obviously, we don't know what the videos show, who's on it. There might be other celebrities and so forth, but it's going to be a challenge in this case.
But, Neama, there is so much evidence. I mean, the Associated Press characterizes this, that the judge set deadlines for lawyers on each side to submit arguments that will establish the boundaries for a trial, establishing boundaries. How do you do that with 96 electronic devices that were seized in these raids? How do you establish narrow boundaries, Neama, with so much evidence?
Well, I think there's a couple ways to do it. One, in terms of the counts and the number of defendants. You know, I'm not going to regurgitate all the unfounded rumors, but there are a lot of them. I'm here in Hollywood and all over the country that there were other rich and powerful people who were involved in these freak-offs. And so far, at least to date, no one else has been charged. Not any members of Diddy's entourage, Christina Joram, his chief of staff, civil lawsuits, but they haven't been charged, at least not yet. So that leads me to believe that the prosecution wants to keep this case streamlined, focused, narrow. And of course, now we know there are some allegations, again, they haven't filed lawsuits yet, but if you believe the civil plaintiffs' attorneys, of minor victims, 25 of which some as young as 9 years old. I think if those individuals come forward, I think prosecutors will really have no choice but to add those allegations to a superseding indictment. And the judge said if that happens, that might push this trial back. And I think the minors are important for one very important reason. Obviously, the law is intended to protect minors, but it really changes the defense in this case because we know that Diddy, through his lawyers, is arguing that these freak offs. They were all consensual. They might be
Yeah.
weird, they might be strange, but obviously minors cannot consent to sexual activity. So, to the extent there's allegations, credible ones involving minors, that puts the defense in a very different position. They can't argue that there was no force, fraud, or coercion. They're gonna have to argue that the sexual contact didn't happen at all. So it'll be a very different defense at trial.
All right, Neama Rahmani there. Can't thank you enough. Just lastly here, do you sense any delays here? You kind of intimated, but for that, what we were just discussing, this could be delayed.
But for a superseding indictment, which means
Okay.
prosecutors go to the grand jury to add additional charges or defendants, I don't think this trial is going to be pushed back unless there's some delay in extracting and producing this data to the defense.
All right, Neama, can't thank you enough. I'm sure we'll be talking about this case very, very soon. Have a good night.
Thanks, Andrew. You too.